Welcome to this 365 Freedom Strategy session. Today we're breaking down the mechanics of the system belief reset and why your biggest business bottleneck is your inability to trust automation.
Right. And we really need to look at the physical reality of what that bottleneck actually looks like in practice. Because, it's usually Friday night pushing 11 p.m.
Oh yeah, the classic founder trap.
Exactly. The office is quiet or the house is asleep, and there you are staring at a screen. You're manually cross-referencing a spreadsheet against the CRM dashboard.
Just to make sure a batch of 50 onboarding emails is flawless before you hit send.
Right. You aren't doing high-level strategy. You aren't closing a massive deal. I mean, you're doing the digital equivalent of stuffing envelopes.
Which is brutal when you think about it.
It is. And the tragic part is you're convinced that doing this manual labor is the ultimate sign of your dedication to quality. You think you're protecting your company, but structurally, you're actively suffocating it.
I've seen that exact scenario play out, 100 times. The founder's exhausted, their eyes are glazed over, but they simply refuse to close the laptop.
Yeah, they just won't let it go.
It's a widespread structural failure. You build a business to a certain point of revenue, you achieve a respectable level of impact, and then you slam into a ceiling.
A very hard ceiling.
Right. And what's fascinating is how we immediately look outward to explain that ceiling. We blame market conditions. We blame shifting social media algorithms, or, we complain about team dynamics.
So it's always the lack of good talent, right?
Always.
Yeah.
But if we're being fiercely analytical here, the actual ceiling is entirely internal. It's a psychological barrier against relying on systemic architecture.
It really is.
So we're speaking directly to you, the founder, the operator, the visionary. You are currently acting as the primary friction point in your own company's growth.
And it's crucial to understand that this resistance is rarely logical. I mean, if you laid out the math of the time wasted on manual tasks, any smart founder would agree it's a terrible return on investment.
Yeah, the numbers don't lie.
They don't. Yet they keep doing it. That tells us we're dealing with an emotional resistance masquerading as a rigorous standard of excellence.
Masquerading is the perfect word for it.
Right. Founders actively sabotage their own scalability through a deeply flawed assumption. They've convinced themselves that their manual effort, their actual physical and mental exertion over a task, is the only possible way to ensure quality control.
I want to challenge that, though, because we can't just dismiss it as pure irrationality.
Fair enough.
Why does exerting manual energy make us feel so secure? Let's really analyze the psychology behind it.
Well, there's a deeply ingrained belief that manual effort feels safer.
Safer, right. It feels familiar. When a founder is in the weeds, manually sending out invoices or individually typing out follow-ups, their nervous system isn't panicking.
Exactly.
But why? Why is that manual struggle equated with safety?
Because in the very beginning of the business life cycle, sweat equity actually was your only capital.
That's true. It's all you had.
When you first launched, you didn't have capital to hire an operations manager or invest in enterprise-level infrastructure. You had your own energy. If a crisis hit, your literal hands on the keyboard saved the day.
So the brain learns a lesson from that.
A very powerful lesson. Your nervous system learns that hypervigilance keeps the business alive. That early trauma of survival wires the brain to believe that safety requires tension.
Wow. Safety requires tension.
Yeah. If you're sweating over a process, if you're physically exhausted by it, your brain registers that as a protective barrier. It's an illusion of control.
So you think, if I am exhausted by this, I must be guarding it.
Precisely. But as the company scales, that survival mechanism becomes a fatal operational flaw.
That makes total sense in the context of founder evolution, but it creates this massive tension between familiarity and effectiveness.
It does.
Because familiarity is just a biological comfort zone. Doing something manually registers as a known variable, and, well, human beings crave known variable.
We're wired for them.
Right. But if your primary metric for evaluating a business process is simply, does this feel familiar to me? You've essentially capped your business at the exact limits of your own personal energy reserves.
And let's be honest, personal energy is an incredibly fragile resource.
Extremely fragile.
That brings us to the core contrast we really need to examine today. Biological effort versus mechanical consistency.
Break that down for us.
Well, human effort is an unreliable biological resource. Your capacity to execute a task flawlessly depends on, the quality of sleep you got last night.
Or the amount of caffeine currently in your bloodstream.
Exactly. or whether you had a frustrating argument with a vendor that morning and the volume of urgent fires burning in your Slack channels, your effort is, by definition, a wildly fluctuating metric.
Right, which makes the founder's mindset almost absurd when you lay it out like that.
It really is.
We assume that because we are personally sweating over a process, the output is somehow superior. But aren't we actually just introducing biological volatility into a process that requires mechanical precision?
You absolutely are. You're bringing human error into a closed environment that doesn't need it.
It just doesn't need it.
Human attention is a depreciating asset. It drops sharply throughout the day. By the time you're executing that manual data entry for the 50th time at 4 p.m., your error rate is climbing aggressively.
You miss a decimal point.
You copy the wrong email address. A system's primary virtue is unyielding consistency. It doesn't get tired. It doesn't get distracted by a sudden influx of text messages.
It just runs.
Right. It executes the precise parameters it was given, flawlessly, 10,000 times in a row.
But founders will hear that and still push back. I mean, I can hear the objection right now.
Oh, absolutely.
They'll say, but my intuition is what built this company. A machine can't read between the lines of a client's email. A machine doesn't have the founder's touch.
I hear that every single week.
So how do you separate high-value intuition from low-value repetition?
You separate it by analyzing the objective nature of the task. Yes, your intuition is required for closing a complex enterprise negotiation or, say, designing a new product architecture.
Sure, that makes sense.
That is high-value biological processing. But sending a 48-hour reminder before a consultation, triggering a payment receipt.
Generating a standard weekly analytics report.
Right. There is zero intuition required for those actions. Injecting the founder's touch into those tasks is just ego.
Ouch. But true.
It is. It's a stunning display of arrogance to believe that an algorithm is less capable of sending a scheduled email than a sleep-deprived human being.
We choose our own biological fluctuation over objective effectiveness because confronting our own inefficiency is incredibly uncomfortable.
It really is uncomfortable. It forces you to realize that you aren't as indispensable to the daily mechanics as you thought.
Exactly.
And to ground this clinical theory in reality, let's look at the specific micro-story we're analyzing today. We have a very clear case study of a business owner who was the living embodiment of this exact biological trap. She really was. She was caught in a paralysis of her own making.
Let's talk about the parameters of her situation because they're highly revealing. This is a founder who aggressively avoided automation for months. She manually handled her scheduling, her client reminders, her follow-ups, and her rationale was precisely what we just mapped out. She believed her manual intervention was the only legitimate way to ensure accuracy.
She wouldn't let the machine turn on.
Right, and the resulting state she found herself in is described with a phrase that I think will resonate viscerally with anyone listening to this session. It says, her days were full, but nothing felt steady.
That's a powerful line.
I want to spend significant time dissecting that paradox. Because how can someone be operating at absolute maximum capacity, maintaining an iron grip on every minor detail, and yet feel completely unstable?
Well, that paradox is the defining symptom of the unsystematized operator. Steadiness does not come from sheer volume of effort.
It really doesn't.
No, steadiness comes from foundational architecture. Think of a building. If you don't pour a concrete foundation and erect steel pillars, you can try to hold the roof up with your own two hands.
But you're going to get crushed eventually.
Exactly. You will be exerting maximum effort. Your muscles will be failing. Your days will be completely full of the desperate labor of holding that roof up. But the structure will never feel steady because a human being is not designed to be a load-bearing wall.
That's exactly it, a load-bearing wall.
Yeah.
When your days are full of manual tasks, you're operating as the single point of failure for every micro-interaction in your company.
Yep.
If you get the flu, the business stalls. If you take a vacation, the cash flow pauses.
Terrifying.
It is. The feeling of unsteadiness is actually a very rational signal from your subconscious. Your brain is recognizing the extreme, terrifying fragility of the structure you've built.
You're running on a treadmill at maximum incline. You're putting in the work, but you aren't anchored to anything solid.
And look at the massive opportunity cost of that fragility. This founder operated this way for months. Consider what was sacrificed.
It's staggering when you add it up.
She traded months of potential scale, Months of clear strategic thinking and months of personal bandwidth just to protect the assumption that she had to hold everything herself.
That's not dedication to the craft. That's operational self-harm.
Operational self-harm. Wow. Which brings us to the moment the tension finally breaks. She
Sure.
reaches a point of sheer exhaustion because biology always loses in the end, and she finally allows a tiny automation to take over.
Just one small thing.
Right. She sets up a system to send a single reminder on her behalf. Just one microscopic, repeatable task. But her mindset the next morning is what I find so compelling here.
Oh, the expectation of failure.
Exactly. She checked the automation, and she was actively expecting something to be off. She anticipated failure. Why do we do that? Why do founders build systems and then root for them to fail?
It's a psychological defense mechanism. She subconsciously wanted the system to break.
Because if it breaks,
Think about the implications. A failure validates her months of martyrdom. It proves her thesis right. If the machine drops the ball, she gets to stand there and say, "See? I told you so. I am the only one who cares enough to get this right. Nobody can do this but me."
it protects the ego's narrative of indispensability.
Exactly. That's a brutal truth.
It really is. Because if the system works perfectly, what does that mean for her?
Well, it means she has to confront the reality that she has been wasting her own time. Yeah. It means the exhaustion she wore like a badge of honor was completely unnecessary. And for a high-performing individual who ties their self-worth to the work ethic, realizing that your hard work was actually just inefficient micromanagement is a very tough pill to swallow.
But the reality of the situation didn't care about her ego. The reminder went out perfectly, flawlessly.
Without a hitch.
The machine executed the parameter without a single error. The emotional and operational shock of that realization must be massive.
It has to be.
You've spent months shielding a process from automation, only to find out the automation handles it with zero friction on day one.
And that gentle, irrefutable proof of concept forces a total paradigm shift. It shatters the illusion.
It really does.
She realized the machine didn't just match her quality. It exceeded her consistency. It didn't hesitate. It didn't need a cup of coffee. It just executed.
It just did the work.
Right. And this is where we arrive at the core diagnosis of this entire strategy session. It's the realization that fundamentally alters a founder's trajectory. She realized the issue was not capability. It was trust.
The issue was not capability, it was trust. Let's really analyze that diagnosis, because I constantly hear founders blaming their tech stack.
All the time.
They say, oh, the CRM is too clunky, or Zapier keeps breaking on me, or my virtual assistant just doesn't understand the nuances of my inbox.
Right. They are constantly pointing the finger at the capability of the external tools. They project their internal trust deficits onto external platforms. The reality is the technology has been hyper-capable for a very long time.
Years.
The software required to send a localized reminder, or process an invoice, or route a customer support ticket has existed for over a decade. The API endpoints are stable. The servers run on 99.9% uptime.
The tools are ready.
The technology has been waiting patiently for the founder to get out of the way. It was never a technology problem. It was a psychological refusal to trust anything outside of their own direct control.
Trust really is the invisible foundation of every system. I mean, you can map out the most beautiful, intricate workflow on a whiteboard by the most expensive enterprise software and hire top-tier integrators.
That won't matter.
Right. Without trust, even those perfectly designed workflows feel unstable. But how does that manifest? How does a perfect system actually fail if the capability is there, but the trust isn't?
It fails because a lack of trust forces the founder to constantly override the system's autonomy.
Give me an example of that.
Let's say you build a fully automated email sequence for new client onboarding. A trusting founder turns it on and walks away.
Right.
A founder lacking trust turns it on, but then logs into the platform every morning to manually review the outbox before the email is sent.
Oh, I've seen that.
They insert manual approval gates where none are required. They double-check the billing portal to make sure the automated receipt actually went out.
So they become the micromanager of their own algorithms.
Exactly.
They build a machine to save time and then spend all their time supervising the machine.
Exactly the dynamic. You neutralize the entire benefit of the systemic architecture. You haven't bought back your time. You've simply shifted your kinetic energy from doing the task to paranoid supervision of the task.
Paranoid supervision, that's a great way to put it.
The workflow feels unstable because your constant interference prevents the system from ever establishing its own operational rhythm. A system cannot demonstrate its reliability if you never let it run autonomously.
Okay, so if the root cause is this deep-seated, trauma-informed lack of trust, what does the system belief reset actually look like in practice?
It's a process.
Because if I'm a founder listening to this and I recognize that I am the micromanager of my own machines, I want to know how to fix it. Is it just flipping a mental switch? Do I just wake up tomorrow and decide to trust the software?
It is absolutely not a mental switch you can just flip.
Right.
You are dealing with years of nervous system conditioning. Your brain has been wired through the intense pressure of entrepreneurial survival to associate delegation with danger.
Delegation equals danger in their minds.
Exactly. A system belief reset is the deliberate, methodical unwiring of that association. It's a process of nervous system regulation where you actively train your brain to accept support without triggering a fight-or-flight response.
You're essentially proving to your own biology that relying on a system does not result in a catastrophic business failure.
Correct.
It's an invitation to aggressively examine every area where you falsely assume you must be the sole actor. But that requires a massive identity shift, doesn't it? You have to transition from being the operator who does everything to the architect who designs the systems that do everything.
And that identity shift is the hardest part. If your entire self-worth and value to the company has been tied to how many buttons you press, how many late nights you pull, and how many fires you manually extinguish,
Right.
who are you when the fires put themselves out?
That's a terrifying question for a lot of people.
It is. You have to find a completely new metric for your worth. You have to value your strategic restraint as much as you used to value your kinetic effort.
And that transition from operator to architect forces us to examine the technical difference in how trust is applied to business infrastructure. Because there's a very specific distinction we need to make here.
A crucial one.
We aren't just talking about letting go of control. Letting go and building systemic support are two completely different mechanisms.
This is a critical distinction that dictates whether a founder successfully scales or dramatically crashes. Letting go is almost always a passive, fearful surrender. It is abdication.
I want to highlight that word, abdication.
Yeah.
Because abdication usually happens at the absolute peak of burnout. It's when a founder is so overwhelmed, so incredibly tired of carrying the weight, that they just throw a massive, complex project over the fence to a new piece of software or a brand new hire.
Just to get rid of it.
Exactly. They don't set up parameters. They don't establish a framework. They just say, I don't care how this gets done. Just get it out of my sight.
And what happens when you abdicate? You aren't establishing a foundation. You're just closing your eyes and hoping gravity doesn't work.
Right.
Abdication is driven by exhaustion, not strategy. Because you didn't properly construct the parameters of the handoff, the system will inevitably encounter friction.
It has to.
The software will miscategorize a tag, or the new hire will make a strategic error. And when that inevitable friction occurs, your deeply held lack of trust is instantly validated.
Your brain screams, see? I knew I couldn't trust anyone else.
Exactly. You immediately snatch the task back, fire the assistant, cancel the software subscription, and retreat back into the familiar, exhausting safety of doing it all yourself.
That cycle of abdication and retreat is why so many founders stay stuck at the exact same revenue plateau for years. They mistake their own poor delegation for systemic failure.
It's a tragic loop.
So if letting go is passive abdication, what does building systemic support actually look like?
Building systemic support is an active strategic choice. It is the recognition that the system isn't just a trash can for tasks you don't want to do.
Okay.
It is a load-bearing pillar that you are intentionally constructing to hold the weight of your company's growth.
Think about it in terms of physical architecture. You have a massive heavy box that represents a critical business process, say your entire client intake and billing cycle.
Okay.
Abdication is just dropping that heavy box on the floor and hoping the contents don't shatter. Building systemic support is taking the time to measure, cut, and install a heavy-duty reinforced shelf. You test the brackets. You make sure it's anchored to the studs. But here's the crucial part. That shelf remains entirely theoretical until you actually pick up the heavy box and place it onto the shelf.
And that is the exact mechanism of trust. Your system becomes reliable the moment you allow it to carry something for you.
It has to carry the weight.
Yes. A system cannot prove its reliability in a vacuum. It requires the founder to actively, deliberately transfer the weight. If you build that beautiful reinforced shelf, but you continue to hold the heavy box while just standing next to the shelf.
The shelf is providing zero value.
Exactly. You're still bearing the weight. Building systemic support means you understand the structural integrity of the workflow you designed, and therefore you can confidently remove your hands and step back.
Taking your hands away is where the intense psychological friction occurs. The immediate instinct is to keep one hand hovering just an inch underneath the box, just in case the shelf gives way.
Just in case.
You want to maintain that micro level of control. How does a founder overcome that instinct? If sweeping abdication fails, what's the actual prescription for successfully transferring that weight?
The prescription is highly calculated to bypass the nervous system's alarm bells. You execute what we call the small handoff.
A small handoff.
You choose one small, highly repeatable task to hand to a system today. Not a core process, not your entire revenue engine. One tiny, isolated task.
Why are those specific constraints, small and repeatable, so vital? Why not just bite the bullet and automate the entire onboarding sequence to get the biggest return on time?
Because massive sweeping automation triggers the hypervigilance loop we discussed earlier. If you attempt to automate a complex multivariable process when your baseline trust level is effectively zero, your nervous system will violently reject it.
It'll freak out.
Absolutely. You'll obsess over every single edge case. What if the client uses a different currency? What if they reply to the automated email with a custom question?
You'll look for problems.
You will actively look for reasons to intervene. Trust cannot be manufactured overnight. It must be earned incrementally. By choosing a tiny task, you minimize the perceived threat level.
Like the single reminder in our case study. You isolate the variables. You intentionally pick a task where the cost of failure is virtually zero.
Exactly.
If one internal reminder fails to send to your own inbox, the company doesn't go bankrupt. The risk is minimized. But if it succeeds, the psychological victory is massive. It acts as a wedge in the door of your own stubbornness.
Exactly. You are engineering a controlled environment where the system belief reset can safely take root. You are giving the architecture an easily winnable game.
A winnable game.
And the requirement that the task be repeatable is equally important. A one-off success doesn't rewrite neural pathways. The system needs to prove its consistency day after day, week after week.
It needs to be boringly reliable.
That relentless, boring repetition builds the evidentiary base required to permanently alter your internal beliefs. You watch it work flawlessly on Monday, then Tuesday, then Wednesday, until eventually you stop checking. That's the moment trust is established.
Trust grows one small handoff at a time, and the yield of that process is what's truly transformative. When you execute that small handoff, the result isn't just crossing an item off a to-do list. The outcome is defined by 3 specific words: space, steadiness, and flow.
Space, steadiness, and flow.
The objective is to let ease begin in one quiet place.
We really need to spend serious time analyzing those outcomes, because founders consistently underestimate the compound interest of small automations.
They really do.
They think, why bother automating a task that only takes me 5 minutes to do manually? It's not worth the setup time.
Right, I'll just do it myself.
But that logic is fundamentally flawed, because it only accounts for the kinetic execution of the task. It completely ignores the cognitive load.
Let's explore that concept of the cognitive loop, because I think this is the hidden tax that bankrupts a founder's energy.
When you hold a manual task in your mind, it acts as a background application, draining your mental RAM. Let's use the 5-minute email as an example.
Okay.
Yes, physically typing and sending it takes 5 minutes, but you spend mental energy remembering that you need to send it at 2 p.m.
Right.
At 1 p.m., you interrupt a strategic thought to remind yourself not to forget the email. At 2 p.m., you spend energy transitioning your focus from a high-level operational problem down to the manual execution of a repetitive template.
It derails you completely.
And after you send it, you spend another 10 minutes trying to get your brain back into the strategic flow state you just broke.
The switching costs are astronomically high. You're fracturing your attention for a low-value action.
Precisely. That single, tiny manual task creates a continuous state of low-level chaos in your operational rhythm. It keeps you tethered to the ground.
Tethered to the ground.
When you hand that task over to systemic architecture, you are not just buying back 5 minutes of typing. You are permanently closing an open cognitive loop.
You're freeing up bandwidth.
You are eliminating the background anxiety of remembering. You replace that localized chaos with steadiness in one quiet place.
The machine remembers so you don't have to, and that extraction of mental clutter is what creates space. We often think of space as just empty blocks of time on a calendar. But operational space is mental clarity.
It's the capacity to think.
It's the capacity to look up and survey the horizon of your industry rather than staring at your feet to make sure you don't trip over your own manual processes.
And from that newly acquired space and steadiness, flow emerges.
Flows.
Flow is the ultimate state of scalable efficiency. It's the condition where the business moves forward, revenue is generated, and clients are served without requiring your constant kinetic energy to push the boulder up the hill.
But flow is structurally impossible if you are constantly interrupting your own momentum to perform manual, repeatable tasks.
It just won't happen.
Which really forces a profound, almost uncomfortable question for anyone listening. If deliberately handing off one tiny, simple task creates this much space, this much steadiness, and removes that much background anxiety, what does it say about the massive, complex tasks you are still aggressively hoarding?
It reveals the massive scale of the self-imposed friction operating within your business right now.
It's a huge mirror to hold up.
It is. If a single automated reminder can shift your entire operational reality from unsteady to steady, imagine the operational leverage of trusting a system with your entire client onboarding phase.
Or your lead generation qualification.
Or your complex financial reporting.
The ceiling you are hitting right now is not a revenue ceiling. It's not a market ceiling. It is a trust ceiling.
A trust ceiling, exactly.
You have successfully scaled your manual effort as far as human biology will allow. You've reached the absolute limit of your own exhaustion.
You can't push any harder.
The next evolution of your business does not require you to work harder, sleep less, or find a brilliant new marketing strategy. It requires a fundamental architectural transfer of weight from your own biological shoulders onto the systemic infrastructure you have the capability to build, but currently lack the courage to trust.
The transition from operator to architect is entirely defined by your willingness to let the structure bear the load.
Well said.
The system is ready. The technological capability is sitting there waiting for you. The only variable remaining is your belief.
So look at your own week. Look at the tasks making your days full but leaving you feeling perpetually unsteady. How much of your current workload is actually just a deep-seated lack of trust disguised as rigorous quality control? What is your version of the manual reminder that you are stubbornly, irrationally holding on to today?
It's time to find out.
If you're ready to see what could flow more smoothly next, visit 365 Freedom Online to join the community. This has been a 365 Freedom strategy session.